Thinking about Passover this time of year inevitably brings up childhood memories for me. Passover was a major annual event in my family, one filled with great joy in our being together. My mother would cook for days. I can still smell her fragrant chicken soup laden with giant matzah balls. And my mouth waters when I remember her wonderful pot roast. Many decades later, I'm still trying to replicate those delicious flavors. My childhood family would gather each year around the dining table to hold our family Passover Seder. For a very long time, I was the youngest soul present, and so I was tasked with asking the 4 questions about the meaning of the holiday. My maternal grandfather would beam proudly as I sang, after which he would say, "Now I will answer your questions." Then he would daven, pray, in Hebrew for an hour or 2, while the rest of us hungrily awaited Mom's chicken soup and pot roast. Later, I would say, "But Grandpa, I could not understand your answers to my questions." And then we would both giggle because we loved each other. A Passover Seder is about retelling the ancient story of the Israelites living in bondage in Egypt, who were rescued and brought to freedom with the help of an almighty God. I treasure the variety of foods that are used to tell the story, encouraging us to experience the plight of the enslaved people. When the Israelites fled Egypt, they ate matzah, an unleavened bread that could be baked quickly. Charosis, a delicious combination of apples, nuts, and wine, reminds us of the mortar the slaves used to build the Egyptian monuments. We combine its sweetness with bitter herbs, usually horseradish, to remind us that life often combines sweet joy with bitter experiences. There are symbols of springtime, such as parsley sprigs, but we dip them into salty water, representing the tears shed by the slaves. The shank bone on the ritual plate reminds us of the sacrificial lamb whose blood the Israelites applied to their doorposts so the angel of death would pass over them, killing only firstborn Egyptian children. The annual observance of Passover is not just about ritual foods that tell us a story. It's also about love, joy, and memories. In his book, Thinking Passover, Rabbi Ben Kamen writes, "Passover is about people and feelings and laughter and tears. It's about remembering what your house used to smell like that time of year, what certain people looked like, and how they sounded and felt, and how that resonated through and around you." Most of us have arrived at Unitarian Universalism after having been raised in other religious traditions. It's comforting to remember the familiar rituals and traditions of our upbringing, to which we are all still so emotionally connected. But Unitarian Universalism calls upon each of us to find our own truth, our own path. We examine the rituals and traditions we grew up with to see how their meaning fits into our lives now, integrating the values that are still useful, and then letting the rest go. It is in this context that thinking about Passover brings me both joyful memories and questions. I stand before you today during Passover, speaking from the pulpit of a Unitarian Universalist community. Oh my gosh, dare I say church? Rather than the bima of a synagogue. Despite what this UU community has meant to me for more than a quarter century, I still feel guilty about having left behind so many of my ancestors' traditions. Being Jewish by birth, but UU by choice, inevitably leads to ambivalence. In the story of Passover, God rescues the Israelites by raining terror upon the Egyptians in the form of 10 terrible plagues, including the last one, the killing of innocent Egyptian children. I struggle to understand the vengeful God of the Old Testament. As Mahatma Gandhi and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth leaves everyone blind and toothless. That God is inconsistent with my UU values. Isn't there a way for us to resolve our differences without inflicting so much pain on one another? And then there's this notion of being the chosen people. Many Jews claim ownership of that title because God rescued the Israelites from slavery, gave them the 10 Commandments, and led them to the promised land. By definition, however, if some people are chosen, then everyone else is not. As a Unitarian Universalist, I affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. I stand before you today as a work in progress. I struggle to study and understand the Jewish heritage into which I was born and raised, and to integrate that heritage into the Unitarian Universalist faith I have freely chosen. Ultimately, I can appreciate the story of Passover because it describes a path for moving from slavery to freedom. But I pray for a time when violence and hatred will be eradicated from the earth, a time when everyone, 'neath their vines and fig trees, will live in peace and unafraid.
When Reverend Dr. Tovis teamed me up with Sheila for the service, set in the season of Passover, the first thing that came to my mind was a self-reminder. Quick, send out the warning to my Metropolitan Community Church's clergy students. It's never okay to celebrate Seder using Christian theology. After all, Jesus was not a Christian. And while the Last Supper may have been a Passover meal, it was not a Seder. That particular ritual wasn't fully developed yet. It's okay to ask a Jewish member of your congregation that if they're willing to lead it, or to join a Jewish community offering a public celebration if your people can attend, but it is never okay to do a Seder without the voices of those who this celebration certainly belongs to. That's called appropriation. Jesus doesn't actually resemble the Messiah as foretold by either conservative or Reform Judaism. Jesus was a Reformation prophet from a sect of Judaism that later split off into a new religion, just as tradition after tradition always has over the course of time. Change is inevitable always, because from birth, every child grows to believe that they can improve upon what all the generations have done before in one way or another, for better or worse, because motives and values vary. Anyway, when I sat down in front of my computer to write, I found myself sort of frozen. I mean, I've always been a part of queer Christian communities until now. A Passover meal is part of the way that we celebrate Holy Week, but it's not a Seder. It's not Passover. I did want to share one of my favorite moments. In the Christian story, Jesus tells a disciple to go to town and look for a man carrying water, and to follow him to a house and ask to use the upper room to celebrate Passover. One question we should ask is why, in a crowded city of people, all preparing celebration meals for their families or running around, would it be easy to spot this man? Well, culturally at this time, the ones carrying water to and from houses were women, not men. He was out of place, perhaps sashaying toward the house with the pot of water on his head. Now, men did carry huge jugs of water for large celebrations. This is not that. So it's very likely a queer ancestor, easy to spot for them, and saying it out loud makes it so, as it is with all of history. Anyway, I sat down at my computer, a little frozen, going down a rabbit hole of what is appropriation and what is not, and how am I supposed to do this? Let's pause for a couple deep breaths. The first thing we should remember is that all stories in every spiritual tradition are written after the fact. And while they have deep truths, they are sometimes not true in every single detail. Certainly, writing before much of today's science is penned, they are only written from the cultural perspective of the time. As we know, even in our current time, there is more than one cultural perspective. I've heard you talk about every kind of faith in this place, mining each one for meaning, while none of them belong to all of you. Most of the time in our sharing at UUSM, it's from the perspective of the ones that own the tradition. And the Seder is not my tradition. So I've been in learning mode today, this week, the whole last year and a half with all of you. And it's been a gift. Thank you for being patient. I'm very thankful for Sheila, who is my partner in this service, is sharing her voice, and I know that I can depend on her to set me proverbially straight, if I stray too far. I identify with Sheila when she says, I feel guilty having left behind so many of my ancestral traditions, and my family's disdain about my decision is still palatable. Perhaps others feel that too in this week where so many faiths are celebrating and so many children feel a little left out. The journey from leaving a familiar, even if uncomfortable place is a hard one. It's a long and winding road. And the story of Passover is interpreted differently among, do I have to say who said a long and winding road? Is that plagiarism? Someone else said that, it wasn't me. The story of Passover is interpreted differently among varied sects of Judaism. So most of my sources have been the ones embraced by Reform Judaism as I prepared today. And also liberation theologies for me, and the story of Jesus is also interpreted in widely different ways among sects of Christianity. But let's take a look at the story of Exodus and the journey that follows, and I'll give you my perspective, which represents no one else. And I assure you that I, just like each of you, are a work in progress. We could begin the story in a lot of places this morning, but let's start with Moses. Moses is born into an enslaved family at a time when the law of the land was to kill every son of the enslaved. In an effort to save the life of the child, he's put in a basket and floated down the river, where eventually he is saved by a princess. His name means pulled out in Hebrew, but there's some scholars that suggest it could mean son of Tut in Egyptian. The boy grows, he's part of the royal family, he has every advantage, the best education. All his needs are met. He's sort of sheltered about what's going on generally. At some point, however, he begins to wander out and to see the land around him. And we don't know for sure when Moses comes to learn of his birth heritage, but we do know that there's a moment when he awakens to the injustice of the ways that slaves are treated, and he's outraged. He kills an overseer doing an act of violence and then has to run for his life. When he runs, he finds a well and a wife. That happens a lot in the Bible. Moses will later become the leader of the Exodus, which is the English name of the book that tells the story. The Exodus from a narrow place called Egypt, narrow geographically, but also narrow spiritually, intent on subjugation, not freedom, stealing self-determination, intent on abuse and superiority. Eventually, all regimes like this fail. Eventually, people refuse to be ruled by fear and find another way. Sometimes it takes a long time, but I keep believing that love always wins. It's a source of secret joy. A series of events unfold until we are told Moses receives a message from God and is asked to deliver it. And so he does, at great potential risk to himself, saying, Pharaoh, God says, let my people go. Was it Frederick Douglass who said power concedes nothing without demand? Moses demands the release of his slaves. No one has power to end this slavery except Pharaoh. It's a one-man show. Now, in democracy, which I certainly prefer, the people are the ones who can fix it. I read from a number of sources that nonviolent protests are very likely to succeed in their goals when the participation exceeds 3.5% of the population. There was between 1 and 1.5% of our population on the streets on April 5th. No matter the situation, those with power usually say no at first to any demand. Pharaoh says, nope, not letting them go. In our story, God then unleashes 10 plagues on the Egyptians in an effort to change Pharaoh's mind. Now, one of the things I love is that there are scientists who spend a lot of time studying extraordinary stories like this and trying to explain why they might be true. That's their whole goal in life. So in this case, it's interesting because many of these plagues were familiar to generations of those who had lived along the Nile, but not in quick succession. So here's one explanation from History.com, written by Christopher Klein. The blood red river might have been created by an algae bloom that sucked all the O2 out of the water where the frogs had to escape and died. The gnats weren't really gnats, but another insect that feasts on dead frogs. And then those flies went on to lay their eggs in livestock in swarms, creating a bacteria known for causing boils on livestock and on the humans who ate the meat. And then rain came in huge drops that looked like, hail. And that released the locusts, the same way our big rains release the ants, release the locusts. And the rain also dampened unprotected grain because there hadn't been rain in years. And the firstborn sons of Egypt ate the grain that now had an infection because the rain fell on it, and it killed them quickly, and the darkness was a volcano blowing up. There you go. Some rabbis say that the slaves also experienced the plagues. Of course, except the last one. When it comes to environmental disasters, we're all in this together, aren't we? After the death of Pharaoh of Egypt's firstborn children, including the Pharaoh's own son, he changes his mind and surrenders, letting the slaves from many different peoples and tribes leave. I imagine in that moment there was great joy. It's even said that the trees clapped their hands and they're allowed to depart in peace. They have permission to leave. However, just after they had left, the Pharaoh changes his mind again and sends soldiers to chase them down. That reminds me of someone changing minds on matters of major consequence. And then the incident in the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea, a storm that blows a path straight through it, saving the slaves and drowning an entire army. Or as they say it, God drowned an army. Remember, everything was either your God or my God, but was all God or someone's God at the time this is written. Some people still claim God. I wish I had the power to control weather assigned to the queer community. How great would that be? Anyway, today we're also rich and poor, suffering environmental disasters that call for action. One can blame God and ignore the situation, or one can notice that there's disaster on the horizon and act to address it. A refusal to act will not help us. It might end up being the end of our civilization. After the Passover, the Hebrews and other tribes of slaves are on the journey to become one people. And I think that's something for us to reflect on here at UUSM during this place in time. What does it mean to make a new way? Where are we still stuck in systems that do not serve us and need to escape? And once we've escaped, where will we go from here? In Reformed Judaism, the last sentence of the Seder for many of the Haggadahs, the order of celebration, is the sentence, next year may we all be free. I went to a presentation by the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, earlier this year, and they're not just about fighting anti-Semitism, but every single kind of discrimination. They seek fair treatment for all, period. And the point of the Seder and the Haggadah is to live into the story, to imagine the escape from Egypt, recognize the narrow places, dedicate ourselves to a journey for freedom, a freedom not just for us, but for others who are oppressed. And I think the need to do this happens in nations, in families, in congregations. It happens to most of us. Where have your narrow places been? Unable to move, needing to break free, and not sure how. The problem for the slaves now free, becoming one people, is that it's not easy. First, they are going somewhere they've never been before and end up wandering at least part of the way in a circle, and it takes a long time. Whenever the Bible says 40 years, it's not literal, it just means a long time. Just like grandfathers who talk for 2 hours? You really prayed for 2 hours? Wow. It could be true, I don't know. They do not start out as people. They have to make a way to become a new community, to give up some of the gods they know in favor of one God that they agree upon. They choose new ways to organize themselves, to govern themselves. In my mind right now, I'm hearing that chant, the people united will never be divided. But you know what? It's not that easy. First, after being fed manna and water, some people begin to remember there was better food while in slavery and begin to reason that it wasn't really that bad and suggested everyone head back to Egypt. The journey to freedom was hard. They didn't like it. And some wanted to be free from the responsibility of freedom and choice. It was too expensive. When Moses went up to the mountain and stayed there so long that they got nervous, some built a golden calf to worship instead of the new God. When Moses insisted there were new rules, it was uncomfortable. Can't we just adapt all the old ones? Freedom and responsibility of freedom is a choice. We can claim it for ourselves, for all around us, and work to make it so. These journeys are often long, made without good maps or directions, and yes, there is some wandering around in circles. There is discomfort and learning, and sometimes the temptation to go back to familiar, unhealthy places. The Seder tells an important story, an important ancestor story for those with Jewish heritage, a deeply treasured one. I probably haven't done it full justice, but the story also has meaning for us and in expansive ways. We can reflect on our own roles as little pharaohs. You could bet that the Pharaoh was fairly insulated from the worst of the plagues as they unfolded, while slave and citizen took the brunt of it. Pharaoh no doubt blamed the slaves for angering gods. It's what power does. When do we use our security or our power to insulate ourselves from the suffering of others? Use others to get more for ourselves? When do we take advantage of suffering? When do we ignore our complicity in modern day social plagues? Like, as the Religious Action Center of Jewish Reform says, anti-Semitism, religious bigotry, attacks on queer people, racism, barriers to mental health care, broken immigration systems, gun violence, hunger, pollution, we can go on and on. Modern day plagues. We can reflect on where we ourselves in narrow places. Sometimes places familiar enough to seem easier than freedom. Sometimes the cost of freedom is discomfort, and we can keep walking through or go back to what was. Where is our strength? The strength is the ability to hold our joy in being free and the willingness to do what it takes to keep it. We can reflect on our own ability to be leaders called to make demands for freedom for others, like Moses did. Sometimes bearing the attacks, even from those who are not yet ready for their escape. In our current political context, many are bound and hardly recognize it. And we can be thankful for ancestor stories, this one, and the ones we might call our own, the ones that give us courage, they remind us that it hasn't always been easy, but we can make a way. We have made a way, can make a way again. We all have roles to play. There's room in this story for each of us. May we be wise in our choices.
Please join me now as we extinguish our chalices.